So it is Sunday of Martin Luther King weekend, Martin Luther King Jr.'s weekend, because tomorrow is officially Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and national holiday here in the United States. And it's always the Monday, that's the first Monday after his birthday. As we all know, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a very beloved American by almost everybody, probably not everybody. He was a real charismatic orator. That's what he's most known for, is his rousing speeches that spoke of brotherhood and oneness and spoke out against segregation and the inequalities that existed with the African American people at that time. One thing that is not spoken of too much, and I thought I'd just mention it, he was a very handsome guy. He was this handsome African American guy. He was always not only great to hear, he was great to watch. And that's a really good combination if you're going to be a good orator. So he had everything going for him in that respect. And I want to mention that. And he kept himself really well, and he always dressed impeccably too. So I mean, he put out a really good image and a really great message, and he was a tremendous speaker. He was born in Atlanta, Georgia, born in January 1929. And he only lived till he was 39 years old because he was assassinated, as we all know, in April of 1968 by James Earl Ray. So he's just 39 years old. So he did all that great work, all that great oratory before he was 40 years old. He was a Baptist minister. He was the son of a Baptist minister. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., was also a Baptist minister. They preached in the same church, still there in Atlanta. If you go to Atlanta, you can go and visit that church, and you can go and visit the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial and Museum, which is actually a wonderful thing to visit. Reverend Deuce Althea and I did that a number of years ago when we visited Atlanta, and it was really moving and wonderful. He also received a doctorate in theology from Boston University, 1955, and that was the same year, in other words, right after that he led the Montgomery School bus boycott. So, I'm sorry, it wasn't a school, it was the Montgomery bus boycott. Now, in the city of Montgomery, the majority of the riders of the buses were the African Americans. And how they would work that was that there was this area that was designated for the whites to sit, and then the African Americans could sit in the area in back of them. But the area was just designated by some sort of placard or something, and if the bus got full, and more whites got on the bus driver could go back and move the placard back a couple of rows to give more rows for the white people. So there's some controversy about how this all happened with Rosa Parks on the bus. So she sat in the first row that was designated for the colored people at the time, the black people. But then the bus got full, and so the bus driver then moved the placard back so that now she was sitting in the white section, though when she got on the bus, it was the colored people section. So then the bus driver asked her to get up, and she wouldn't. So that's how that was. And there was actually another case that had happened just a few months before. A woman named Claudette Colvin was a young woman who a very similar thing had happened. And both of those cases were actually what started the Montgomery bus boycott. So what happened was that all the African American people just boycotted the buses for almost a whole year, and found other ways to get to their jobs and get to their works, and they were basically bankrupting the city's buses. And so that's all of that, and then of course there was the great court case and with Rosa Parks, and went all the way to the Supreme Court. Another great thing that Martin Luther King did was that he organized the March on Washington in 1963, and that's where he gave the famous I Have a Dream speech. And that speech is considered by many people the most famous speech in the history of the United States. And, probably is, I think probably, you got the President Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, that's probably a pretty famous speech. But, probably more people are a little more aware of the I Had a Dream speech. It's more contemporary and more impactful for many, many people. And shortly after that big March on Washington that Martin Luther King Jr. organized and the giving of that amazing speech, shortly after that, that's when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was enacted and signed into law. So we as a Course in Miracles people, I think, have a lot to embrace here with Dr. Martin Luther King. For one, he was fighting for the equality of all human beings. So we certainly embrace that as a central tenet of A Course in Miracles, that all human beings, regardless of race and gender and any distinction, are basically all equal. Course in Miracles has that teaching in it so much. It's hard to study Course in Miracles and escape that. I don't think you could. And I trust my brothers who are one with me. All of our brothers and our sisters and all of the others out there are one with us. They are us. It's not just one with us in terms of brotherhood, but it takes it even further that they actually are us. That they all are a reflection of us. So Course in Miracles takes that to a truly absolute place. And, we're in that thinking, and of course the culture has progressed, but it's almost really hard for us to put ourselves back in the mindset of what it must have been like in the 1950s and the 1960s. And as bad as it was in the 1950s and 60s, it's even harder probably to put your mind back into the mindset of what it was like before the American Civil War. So we've come a long way, and there have been people that helped us a lot, like Dr. Martin Luther King. And that's not to say that we still don't have a long way to go. We do still have a long way to go, but I think it's important, especially on days like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, to really realize and to acknowledge how far we have come and the progress that we have made. One of his lines in the I Have a Dream speech is, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." Okay, so that's that famous line from the Declaration of Independence. Actually a fairly prophetic line to be in the Declaration of Independence, because at that time women had almost no rights and African Americans were slaves. So somehow that line got in there, and it was a seed that was just bound to germinate, and it did. And the germination of it had a lot of attendant violence and negativity associated with it. But eventually, Martin Luther King's dream is coming true, has come true, that we do live in a nation now that is embracing the meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. It's self-evident. It's evident to the self. It isn't something we ever have to really argue or prove. It is just evident. When we go within and look for the truth, we just know that that's what the truth is. I think A Course in Miracles is really good with that. It teaches us how to go within and access the truth of things. We don't just accept all the teaching of A Course in Miracles because we get taught it and we learn it and then we embrace it. We accept the teaching of A Course in Miracles because we go within and it's self-evident. It just reveals itself. It's just true. We just know it's true. We feel it true. So I believe A Course in Miracles students, generally, when they go within, they know that we are all joined and we are all one. In October 1964, that was the year after the March on Washington, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. And then in 1965, he organized the Selma to Montgomery March, And that was depicted in the movie a couple years ago named Selma. And that was really fighting for the right for the African Americans to vote, because there were all of these laws in place that prevented African Americans from registering to vote. And so they were going to march to Montgomery, Alabama, which was the capital of Alabama, and demand changes so that they could have the right to vote. And in the initial stage of the march, of course, as people know, there was great violence. But they were eventually escorted by the U.S. military and were able to get to Montgomery. And Martin Luther King, of course, was very instrumental in that. And then 3 years later, he was shot and his body died. Martin Luther King Day was instituted in 1971. It was declared a national holiday, 1986, by Ronald Reagan. We have a wonderful Martin Luther King monument right here in San Francisco, right near the Metreon. I don't know if some people don't even know that that is there, but it's actually a wonderful monument to Martin Luther King right there at the Metreon. See, Reverend Ted didn't even know it was there. Go to the Metreon, go to the lawns that exist in between the Metreon and, the Museum of Modern Art, and there's a wonderful monument and fountain, beautiful, to Martin Luther King Jr. And there is now a Martin Luther King monument on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Whenever I talk about Martin Luther King, I like to mention that the day before he was shot and killed, he gave another very, very famous speech, which is sometimes called the I've been to the mountaintop speech. And there's something really prophetic in that speech. It's like almost he knows that his time here is up. Because he says, like anybody, and this is right at the end of his speech, this is like the last formal thing he said publicly. Like anyone, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go to the mountain. And I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And so I'm happy. I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. So it seems really obvious that at least a part of his spirit, his soul, knew that his time here was done. I wanted to focus a little bit on the I Had a Dream speech, because I also think that we as A Course in Miracles students can really embrace that as well. Because A Course in Miracles talks about this world as a dream, and it also talks about this world is a dream and we are here to make it into the dream that Holy Spirit wants us to make it into. So we have a dream. Not only does Martin Luther King have a dream, we have a dream. We have a dream of how we want, how we're inspired, how the Holy Spirit is inspiring us to manifest the world. And I think we can really connect with the spirit and energy that Martin Luther King Jr. had on that day. One of his quotes from the I Had a Dream speech is, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. And I remember that our President Barack Obama used that quote too in some of the speeches that he did. That we don't judge people by the color of their skin or by any kind of external characteristic. That we judge people by their character. Or, of course, a miracle student, you don't judge them at all. You judge them as holy children of God. But I believe that we have a dream. And it's important for us to just really claim what our dream is. And our dream is called, in A Course in Miracles terms, the real world. So we have a dream of a real world. We have a dream of a happy world, called sometimes the happy dream. And in A Course in Miracles, we read, and this was in the reading that Reverend Steve read, it says, "We once said that the first change before dreams disappear is that your dreams of fear are changed to happy dreams." So we have a dream that one day we will be in a world where people will all be happy, that there won't be this attendant fear and anger and frustration that so many people appear to have from time to time, and that when it does bubble up, we will all have a technology that works for us that will be able to heal that, so that we will come back to happiness and peace. And we have that dream. We have that dream that we can live in a world where everybody can be peaceful and happy. We have a dream. Also in the reading it said, "The dream of waking is easily transferred to its reality, for this dream comes from your joined will with the will of God, and what this will would have accomplished has never not been done." So the reason why we can absolutely trust that that dream is going to manifest is because it happens when we join our will with our Creator, with the Divine, with the Holy Spirit, because that's the dream that comes from our mind joined with the Divine. And that dream cannot help but manifest. So just like Martin Luther King Jr. was sure, that's what he was communicating, that his confidence that that dream of the promised land was going to happen, we can communicate our dream to the world too, because we're sure that dream of a peaceful, happy, loving world is going to happen, because we have the confidence that comes from our joined will with our Creator, because that's where that dream comes from. A Course in Miracles also says, "The happy dream about your brother takes the form of the appearance of his perfect health, his perfect freedom from all forms of lack, and safety from disaster of all kinds. The miracle is proof he is not bound by suffering or loss or any form, because it can so easily be changed." So we have a dream, and our happy dream means that all of our sisters, brothers, others, and ourselves will have an appearance of perfect health. We have a dream where this illusion of sickness will no longer be in the world that we see. That's our dream as A Course in Miracles students. We have a dream about the end of sickness, and that if a sickness does crop up, then we have an immediate technology to identify it and correct the thinking that caused it to manifest, so that the truth of our health and wholeness and our sisters, brothers, and others' health and wholeness can manifest again. And that's the promise of A Course in Miracles. That's the dream A Course in Miracles tells us that we're going to have. And we have that dream, and we know it's true because it comes from our joined will with the Divine. And this is a challenge to maintain this perspective at times. And it's a challenge to communicate that to the world at times, because the people who maybe aren't in this way of thinking just think you're nuts. They just think you're a little weird. And that you're studying some kind of something that's, like really kind of working with your mind in a way that they probably don't think is really pretty realistic or healthy for you. You gotta get real, Tony. Come on. You gotta get real. And we say, yeah, we are getting real. We're getting real like a reflection of reality, like the real world, this world that works for everybody, where everybody's healthy and happy and peaceful and abundant. And that's the dream that we have. We have a dream. And it's that the world can be healthy, happy, abundant for everybody. And that when anything comes up that seems to be a glitch in that, we correct it. We identify it and correct it. And we don't fear being called weird. And that's what I want to end with. We need to confront that. And Martin Luther King confronted it too. He said, many people fear nothing more terrible than to take a position which stands out sharply and clearly from the prevailing opinion. The tendency of most is to adopt a view that is so ambiguous that it will include everything, and so popular that it will include everybody. Not a few men who cherish lofty and noble ideas hide them under a bushel for fear of being called different. So we're being challenged by Martin Luther King there, not to hide the dream that we have under a bushel because of that fear of being called different. Because it's time to make that dream manifest. And I think here on Martin Luther King weekend and the celebration of maybe the most famous speech in the history of America, we can have our dream, because dreams got a little window of opportunity right now to manifest. So let's have our dream, and let's claim our dream, that world that works for everybody. Thank you. Amen.